I never imagined that the child I once cradled in my arms, the girl whose scraped knees I patched and whose tears I wiped away, would one day look me in the eyes and tell me I wasn't grandma material. She didn't say it with a laugh or a hint of teasing. She said it with a flat, measured tone, like a verdict that had been decided long before the trial. Those words lodged in my chest like shards of glass. My mind raced back through decades of sacrifice, the nights I worked double shifts to pay her tuition, the vacations I skipped so she could study abroad, the wedding I helped fund so she could have her perfect day. I had imagined my golden years filled with the laughter of grandchildren, Saturday visits, and family dinners. Instead, I was being told I wasn't welcome in their lives. What my daughter didn't realize was that her cruel words planted a seed that would grow into a plan, one that would ensure she regretted underestimating me. Stay with me until the end, because when you hear who inherited everything I own, you'll understand why it wasn't her. Please subscribe to this channel. My name is Daniel Hart, though most people around Birch Street call me Mr. Hart, in that polite, neighborly way that says you've lived long enough to be a landmark. I'm 68, a retired safety inspector who still can't pass a crooked handrail without straightening it. My late wife, Ruth, used to laugh that I inspected life the way I inspected bridges, testing for stress before anything could break. We had one child, our daughter Claire. If you asked me what I loved most in this world, I'd say Ruth's humming, the smell of fresh-cut pine in my little workshop, and Claire's voice when she called me Dad, like it was a title I'd earned. Ruth died 12 years ago. Cancer doesn't care how useful you are or how carefully you keep your calendars. One season we were shopping for a new garden hose. The next I was learning how to fold sheets by myself. People say grief softens with time. Maybe it does. But some edges stay sharp no matter how many times you run your fingers over them. Claire and I learned to be a team: burnt dinners, mismatched socks, Saturday errands, and late-night talks where I pretended to know the answers and she pretended to believe me. When Claire met Ryan, I tried to be generous. He had the smile of a brochure and the handshake of a man who collected them. Corporate law, slick suits, a car that looked like it would scold you for leaning on it. He called me sir too often and complimented the joinery on a coffee table as if sincerity were a performance he'd rehearsed. But he loved my daughter, or said he did, and that was enough for me. I paid for their rehearsal dinner, fixed a wobble in the venue's arch so the photos wouldn't show a tilt, and danced with Claire to Ruth's favorite song. When she put her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for everything," I filed the moment away like a polished tool. After the wedding, their lives moved faster than mine. Promotions for Ryan. Pilates and pottery for Claire. They called every Sunday, sometimes while walking the aisles of a perfectly organized grocery store that played old music too softly. I learned to be grateful for small windows. A funny story from her office, a recipe that worked, a question about which drill bit to buy. I learned the silence between us, the parts of her life that didn't fit into a 10-minute call. The day she told me she was pregnant, I was in my workshop planing cherry wood. My hands smelled like sawdust and lemon oil. My phone buzzed. "Dad," she said, breathless, "I have news." I braced my heart. "We're having a baby." I sat down hard on the stool, the one with Ruth's paint flecks frozen like confetti. "You're going to be a grandfather." I said nothing clever, just a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a cry. I imagined tiny socks on a radiator, Saturday morning pancakes, a small hand learning how to hold a pencil the way I'd taught Claire. The shift was slow, almost polite. It began with articles sent to me, links about infant sleep science and nutrition, charts with colors that meant never and rarely. Then came the sentences shaped like fences. We're keeping things low stimulation. We're being careful about attachments. We're doing gentle parenting, Dad. It's different. I nodded, the way you do when you want to stay welcome. I bought books. I read them. I thought, love is not a method, it's a posture. I kept that thought to myself. 2 months before the due date, they invited me to lunch. I wore a pressed shirt and brought a small wooden rattle I'd turned on the lathe from maple and walnut. It felt warm in the palm, smooth as river stones. Their condo smelled like eucalyptus and new rugs. Ryan sat at the head of the table with a notepad. Claire had her hands folded the way she used to when she had something difficult to say at the school table. Dad, she began, we're really excited for you to meet the baby. Pause. But we need to talk about boundaries. Ryan cleared his throat. Consistency is crucial in early development. Claire and I have discussed a structure that will set our child up for success. He said structure, the way I say safety. Claire glanced at him, then back at me. So, no unannounced visits. No feeding anything that isn't on the list. No holding the baby when she's overstimulated. And, she inhaled. No babysitting. Not at first. Something in me stepped back from my own body and watched myself nod. Of course, I said. You set the rules. I placed the rattle on the table like an offering. I made this. Claire smiled, the kind of nice smile you give to a stranger who hands you a flyer. Oh, Dad, that's beautiful. We can, maybe display it. Display. The word landed with the soft weight of a paper cut. The baby Emma arrived on a Wednesday. I learned first from a text 2 photos, a heart, and doing great will call when we're home. I stood in my kitchen, pouring coffee I didn't drink, visiting and revisiting those photos until my eyes blurred. 3 days later, I was invited to see her, scheduled like a cable installation. I brought a quilt Ruth had half sewn years ago, blue triangles like little sails. You can keep it at your place, Claire said gently, as if I'd asked for something. I washed my hands, sat on their sofa, and waited for the permission that never came. Emma slept against Claire's chest. She was perfect in the way new things are perfect. A face like a secret, breathing like a tiny engine. Can I began. Claire pressed her lips together. Not today, Dad. She's not used to you. I swallowed that sentence like a stone. At my sister Nora's birthday a month later, the backyard was full of laughing people and folding chairs that leaned a little. I brought my famous potato salad and the hope you pack when you think maybe a crowd will soften a heart. Claire arrived late with a stroller that cost more than my first car. Emma wore a tiny hat that made everyone coo. I waited my turn. Could I hold her? I asked when Claire and I were briefly alone by the hydrangeas. She scanned the yard, then me. We're keeping her close today. Her eyes softened. You know how you are with letting kids cry. I stared at her. How I am. She shrugged like we were talking about weather. It's just old school. We're doing things differently. Then she smiled and moved on, my question still hanging between the petals. People noticed without wanting to. Conversations thinned when I approached. Ryan explained attachment windows to a cousin who nodded too hard to mean it. I stayed an hour longer than I wanted and left without saying goodbye. At home, I set Ruth's quilt on the back of the sofa and sat in the dark until the room rearranged itself around my breathing. The next morning, I did what a man like me does when the world refuses to sit square. I fixed things. I replaced a squeaky hinge. I planed a sticking door. I swept the porch, humming the tune Ruth used to hum when she was angry and needed both hands free. I told myself that time is a solvent. It wasn't. Weeks became modes of silence. I learned Emma's milestones through posts. First smile. First roll. hearts layered under strangers' comments, so precious. My own heart felt like a quiet room no one used anymore. I texted Claire pictures of the garden. She responded with thumbs up. I called on Sundays and heard the rush of a blender, a "can't talk, Dad," the chirp of a doorbell in the background. When I offered to build a crib, something solid she could point to and say, "My dad made that," Claire said the nursery theme was clean Nordic, and my work was too rustic. I turned off the lathe and listened to the shop go still. Two small things changed everything. The first was a comment I wasn't supposed to hear. At Nora's house, while I stood at the sink rinsing plates, Claire and Ryan whispered down the hall. "Your dad has assets," Ryan said, the word brittle. "We should make sure the estate is clear." Claire sighed. "If he wants to be useful, he can set up a fund for Emma. It's not like he'll be the hands-on type." Silence. Then, "He's not grandparent material." The sentence floated down the hall and landed in the dishwater with a sound only I could hear. The second was simpler. My neighbor, Mrs. Ortega, asked if I could help her grandson repair a wobbly bike seat. The boy was 9 and all elbows. I showed him how to tighten the clamp, how to test, how to trust the fix. He said, "Thanks, Mr. Hart," like he meant it. When he pedaled away, the joy on his face was the kind you can't fake. I stood there, a wrench in my hand, and thought, love has always been a verb. Even if my daughter had decided mine was the wrong tense. That night, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and took out my will. The paper felt heavier than it used to. My life, summed up in careful paragraphs. The house, the savings, the investments Ruth and I had built by saying later, when we wanted to say now. I had written Claire's name everywhere there was something that mattered. I had expected to die grateful that my work would hold her life the way my arms once had. I set the will on the table and looked at the empty chair across from me. "What would you do, Ruth?" I asked the quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, wind worried the maple leaves. Inside, something old and soft in me closed its eyes. I didn't lift a pen. Not yet. You don't tear down a bridge because one plank creaks. You inspect. You measure load. You decide with both the head that calculates and the heart that remembers. But I knew for the first time that the plan I'd carried for years might not be the right one anymore. I knew that love without respect is charity, and charity without gratitude is insult. And I knew, as surely as I know the sound a level makes when the bubble finds the center, that a reckoning was coming. The weeks after I took out my will felt like standing on the edge of a job site, clipboard in hand, watching cracks spider through a bridge you'd spent decades maintaining. You know the structure won't collapse today, but you can't unsee the stress points. Claire's distance became a kind of architecture built deliberately, piece by piece. Calls grew shorter. Invitations were replaced by updates delivered through group texts. If I sent a picture of the tomatoes in my garden, I'd get a thumbs up emoji. If I asked about Emma, I'd get a vague, "She's doing great," and nothing more. The breaking point came on Emma's first birthday. I hadn't been invited, but I found out from Nora, who assumed I'd be there. She texted me a photo, a backyard strung with pastel bunting, a tower of cupcakes, and a banner that read, "Emma turns 1. Claire held her daughter in a matching headband, Ryan smiling beside her, family members crowded around. Everyone was there. Everyone but me. I stared at that picture until the colors seemed to fade. A year of my granddaughter's life, and I had barely seen her awake, never held her longer than it takes to pass a plate at dinner. 2 days later, I ran into Claire at the grocery store. She was in the cereal aisle, Emma in the cart seat, eyes wide and curious. I couldn't help myself. I walked over. "Hi there, sweetheart," I said softly, my eyes on Emma before I looked at Claire. Claire's hand tightened on the cart handle. "Dad, please, don't. She's not used to you." Something inside me snapped. How could she be used to me, Claire? You've made sure she barely knows who I am. Her mouth set in that calm, infuriating way she'd learned from Ryan. We're protecting her. We want her to grow up in a certain kind of environment, without conflicting influences. Conflicting influences. That was me now, an influence to be managed. I walked away without another word, my footsteps sounding too loud in the polished aisle. That night, my sister Nora came over with a casserole and the look of someone who'd heard enough to be angry on your behalf. She's been saying things to the family, Nora told me, setting the dish on the counter. That you're old-fashioned. That you wouldn't follow their rules for Emma. I shook my head. Since when is loving your family a rule you have to pass a test for? Nora crossed her arms. Ryan's been hinting that they'll need to make sure your will is clear. She made air quotes with her fingers. Clear for them, I assume. That was the moment the seed of my decision started to grow into something solid. My will wasn't going to be their safety net, not when they treated me like a stranger who might contaminate their perfect little world. Marlene, my neighbor, noticed the change in me. She has a knack for catching things unsaid. One evening, she leaned on my fence while I was pruning the roses. You've been quiet lately, Tom. Not your usual self. I kept my eyes on the shears. Just family stuff. Family stuff doesn't usually make a man's shoulders look like they're carrying bricks, she said gently. I don't know why I told her everything. Maybe because she listened without interrupting, without trying to excuse Claire's behavior. I told her about the boundaries talk, the birthday I wasn't invited to, the grocery store incident. I told her about hearing Ryan talk about future arrangements, like my life was an account to be liquidated. When I finished, Marlene shook her head. That's cold, Tom. Real cold. You deserve better than that. Her words sat with me long after she'd gone back to her porch. 2 weeks later, Nora invited me to Sunday dinner. She said Claire and Ryan would be there, along with a few cousins. Just come, she urged. Face them. I went, partly out of obligation, partly because I wanted to see if they'd acknowledge what they'd been doing. The moment I walked in, I knew they wouldn't. Claire gave me the same bright, polite smile she'd perfected for parties. Ryan shook my hand like we were business associates. Over dinner, Ryan steered the conversation toward long-term planning. He spoke about the importance of securing the family's financial future, in a tone that made it sound like a community service announcement. Claire nodded along, occasionally chiming in about how they were making sure Emma would be set for life. It was a performance, and I knew my role, silent benefactor, head nodding in agreement. But I didn't nod. I just watched them the way you watch a clock run down. When dessert was served, Claire looked at me across the table. Dad, have you updated your will recently? The question was casual in tone, but her eyes were sharp. I have, I said evenly. It's exactly how I want it. She smiled, thinking she knew what that meant. She didn't. That night, I sat at my desk with the will in front of me. I'd already spoken to my lawyer, Mr. Benson, once about the possibility of changes. Now I was ready. The next morning, I walked into his office and said, I want to remove my daughter and her husband as beneficiaries. I want to leave everything to someone who has actually been there for me. Do you have someone in mind? He asked. Yes, I said without hesitation. My neighbor, Marlene. He raised an eyebrow. Any particular reason? She's treated me like family when my own blood hasn't, I said simply. That's reason enough. By the end of the meeting, the papers were signed. My house, my savings, my investments, everything I had built over a lifetime was no longer theirs to inherit. I didn't tell Claire. Not yet. This wasn't about a dramatic announcement. It was about reclaiming something they had slowly stripped from me, my dignity. From that day forward, I stopped chasing their approval. I didn't call every Sunday. I didn't offer to visit. If they wanted to keep me at a distance, I would give them all the space they could handle. In that space, something surprising happened. I started to feel lighter. Marlene and I shared more dinners, more conversations. I fixed things around her house and she brought over pies and laughter. I began volunteering at the community workshop again, teaching kids how to build birdhouses and repair old furniture. I was still their father, still Emma's grandfather by blood. But in my heart, I knew the truth. They had decided long ago that I was nothing more than an obligation. Now I was free to decide what they were to me. And I had decided. It was late October when the invitation came. The card was thick, cream-colored, with family dinner written in Claire's careful handwriting. No explanation, no occasion. Just a date, a time, and please come. I almost tossed it in the recycling. Then I thought about Nora's voice in my head saying, face them. I decided to go, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because part of me suspected this wasn't a dinner at all, it was a meeting. The evening was cold, the kind where the wind slides down the back of your neck no matter how tightly you pull up your collar. Claire's house glowed like a magazine spread when I arrived, warm lights, trimmed hedges, music playing low inside. She greeted me at the door with a smile that was all surface. Dad, so glad you could make it. I stepped inside. Ryan appeared, his hand on her back. Tom. Big night tonight, lots to talk about. The dining room table was set for 10. Silverware lined up like soldiers. Family members I hadn't seen in months were their cousins, Nora, even Claire's aunt from out of town. Everyone seemed expectant. We went through dinner like actors in a play. Polite conversation. Small laughs. Passing dishes without letting our hands touch. But once the plates were cleared, Ryan stood and tapped his glass. If I could have everyone's attention, he began, Claire and I have been doing a lot of thinking about the future. I leaned back in my chair. Here it comes. Ryan launched into a speech about family legacy and ensuring stability for the next generation. Claire picked up from there, talking about planning ahead and making sure there are no surprises down the road. Dad, she said, looking straight at me, we just want to make sure your will is up to date. That everything is in order so, when the time comes, it's all seamless. I could feel every eye in the room turn to me. I didn't speak right away. I took a sip of water, set the glass down carefully. It's in order, I said finally. Relief flickered across her face. She thought the conversation was over. But, I continued, it may not be in the order you're expecting. The words hung there. A few people shifted in their chairs. Ryan frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I folded my hands on the table. It means that I've made changes. My estate will be going to someone who has treated me like family when my own blood wouldn't. A murmur rippled through the room. Claire's smile faltered. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying everything I own, my house, my savings, my investments will go to Marlene, my neighbor. She's been there for me when you wouldn't. She listened when you didn't. She cared without needing a reason. The silence after that was the kind that fills every corner. Marlene. Ryan's voice had an edge now. You're leaving everything to your neighbor? Yes, I said simply. Claire's face went pale. She's not family. I looked at her and felt something inside me settle. Family isn't just blood, Claire. It's love, respect, and showing up. You made it clear a long time ago I wasn't welcome in yours. The room was still except for the faint clink of someone setting down a fork. I could see Ryan doing the math in his head, recalculating a future that suddenly looked very different. Claire shook her head. You can't be serious. I didn't raise my voice. I've never been more serious in my life. Nora sat there with her lips pressed together, a look of quiet approval in her eyes. She didn't need to say anything, I could feel her agreement like a warm hand on my shoulder. Ryan looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the angle. He glanced at the others, maybe hoping for support. None came. I stood. I think that's enough for tonight. Claire stood too. Dad, wait. No, I said gently. I've said what I came here to say. I thanked Nora for inviting me, put on my coat and walked out. The air outside was sharp and cold, but it felt cleaner than the room I'd just left. When I got home, Marlene was sitting on her porch, a mug of tea steaming in her hands. How was dinner? She called. I stopped at the fence. Eventful, I said. She smiled knowingly. Sounds like there's a story. There is, I said. But for now, it's enough to know the story's ending the way it should. The next morning, Claire called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice tight, almost pleading. Dad, we need to talk about last night. You can't just do something like that. We're family. I listened to it once, then deleted it. In the days that followed, word spread. Some relatives thought I was cruel. Others thought I was right. But I stopped worrying about who agreed. I'd made my decision, and I'd made it for me, not for their approval. For the first time in years, I felt free. In the week after the dinner, Claire's calls came daily. I didn't answer most of them. When I did, I kept my voice calm and my sentences short. One afternoon, I finally picked up. Dad, she began, her tone halfway between frustration and panic. We need to revisit this whole thing. You were upset, I get that, but you can't just. I can, I said, cutting in. And I have. The paperwork's signed. Her breath caught. You're making a mistake. No, I said evenly. The mistake was thinking I'd hand over my life's work to people who've made it clear I don't belong in their lives. There was a pause. We were trying to protect Emma. I sighed. From me? She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quieter. We didn't think you'd understand our way of doing things. That's the problem, Claire, I said. You never gave me the chance to try. I ended the call before the conversation could circle back into excuses. A few days later, Ryan showed up at my front door unannounced. For once, he wasn't polished, no suit, no perfect hair, just a windbreaker and eyes full of calculation. Tom, he said, forcing a smile, I think we got off on the wrong foot at dinner. You and I were both practical men. We can work this out. I leaned on the door frame. It's already worked out, Ryan. Just not in your favor. He dropped the smile. Do you have any idea how this looks? People are talking your own family. You're making yourself look petty. I kept my voice level. You mean I'm not doing what you expected? There's a difference. His jaw tightened. You'd really rather give everything to a neighbor than your own daughter? I'd rather give everything to someone who's been there for me, I said. And that happens to be my neighbor. He muttered something under his breath as he walked away. I didn't bother to catch it. Meanwhile, life with Marlene carried on like nothing had happened. She didn't gloat or act like she'd won something. If anything, she seemed cautious about the whole arrangement. Tom, she said one evening over coffee, I appreciate what you've done, but you don't have to explain yourself to me. This isn't about the money, is it? No, I said. It's about dignity. About leaving behind something for someone who treated me like I mattered. She nodded slowly. Then I'll do right by it. I believed her. By Christmas, the ripple effect of my decision was obvious. Claire and Ryan's invitations to family gatherings had thinned. People who used to side with them now kept a polite distance. At Nora's holiday dinner, I noticed the difference in how people spoke to me: less pity, more respect. Even those who didn't approve seemed to understand I wasn't the kind of man you could walk over. Halfway through the evening, Nora pulled me aside. She's been telling people you were manipulated by Marlene, she said quietly. But most folks know better. They've seen how she treated you. I nodded. Let them talk. I'm not changing my mind. January brought a call I didn't expect. It was Claire, her voice shaky. Dad, things aren't going well. Ryan's firm let him go. We're struggling. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. We were hoping, she continued, maybe you could help. Just until we get back on our feet. I closed my eyes. Claire, I'm sorry you're going through this. But I'm not your safety net anymore. You made it clear I wasn't part of your family. That door swings both ways. Her breath hitched. So you're really just going to let us fail? I softened my tone but not my resolve. I'm going to let you live with the choices you made. That's different. She hung up without saying goodbye. After that, the call stopped. Months passed quietly. I poured myself into the things that made me feel alive again, teaching woodworking at the community center, tending my garden, sharing evenings with Marlene on her porch while the sun dipped below the rooftops. I thought I might feel guilty. I didn't. I thought I might miss the constant effort of trying to earn my place in their lives. I didn't miss that either. What I felt instead was peace. The final piece of justice came in the form of an envelope delivered by courier. It was a letter from my lawyer, confirming that the updated will had been filed with the county. A copy was enclosed for my records. I set it on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long moment before opening it. There it was in black and white. Every asset, every account, every possession now legally destined for Marlene. No loopholes, no way to contest without a fight they'd be foolish to take on. I placed the letter back in the envelope and tucked it away in the desk drawer. The same drawer where the old will used to live. That version was gone now, shredded into confetti months ago. One spring afternoon, I found myself walking past Claire's house. She was in the yard with Emma, who was now a toddler, chasing a red ball across the grass. I stopped at the edge of the sidewalk. Emma saw me and paused, tilting her head in that curious way children do. Claire noticed and froze. For a long moment we just looked at each other. There was no anger in her face this time, just something I couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe. Or the realization that she had miscalculated the one person she thought she understood completely. I nodded once, to her and to the little girl who might never know me the way I'd once dreamed she would. Then I kept walking. By summer, the tension had faded into something quieter. We weren't close, but we weren't at war either. And I realized something important. The absence of constant conflict can feel like a win in itself. Marlene and I spent more evenings together, sometimes talking, sometimes just listening to the crickets. One night she asked, "Do you ever think she'll forgive you?" I shook my head. If she ever does, it won't be for my sake, it'll be because she's finally ready to see the truth. And if that day never comes, I'll still sleep at night. Revenge, I learned, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the steady satisfaction of knowing you stood your ground, that you didn't trade self-respect for temporary peace. And for me that was enough. Looking back, I realized this was never really about money. It was about value, not the kind printed on checks, but the kind measured in how people treat you when you have nothing left to give but yourself. I spent years believing that love and loyalty from family were unshakable truths. That no matter how life shifted, the bonds you built would hold. But sometimes those bonds fray not from distance, but from disrespect. When Claire told me I wasn't grandma material, she probably thought the words would fade. Instead they stayed, carving out a space where trust used to live. Changing my will wasn't an act of spite. It was a declaration, I will not reward cruelty with generosity. I didn't take away her inheritance to punish her, I gave it to someone who had earned it. Someone who showed up without keeping score. Claire may never understand. Maybe one day she will. But I know this. I left my life's work in the hands of someone who valued me, not just my possessions. Sometimes justice is loud. Sometimes it's quiet. But when it's yours, it's always enough. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to this channel for more stories like this.